let's dive in. Today, we're exploring the world of Fernando Pessoa, this 20th century Portuguese writer.
Yeah.
You sent over a ton of stuff about him.
Yeah.
And wow, this guy's mind. Talk about a rabbit hole.
Right.
So he created all these like alternate personalities. They're called heteronyms. And he used them to explore like all these different parts of himself and the world.
Exactly.
It's like imagine having different versions of you running around, each with their own personality, their own way of writing.
It's pretty mind-blowing. It really is a unique concept in literature.
Totally. And I don't know if you know this, but when I was going through all the stuff you sent, I noticed how these different personalities, they all wrestle with these big questions like, who am I?
Right.
What's the meaning of all this?
Yeah.
Even like, what is reality, really?
Totally. It's like he was using these different personas to grapple with the human condition from all these different angles.
Right. So we're going to be talking about some of the big ones today. Alberto Caeiro.
Yes.
Ricardo Reis. And Álvaro de Campos.
Exactly.
But before we get lost in all that, let's start with Pessoa himself. Who was this guy?
Well, on the surface, Fernando Pessoa, born in Lisbon in 1888, lived a pretty normal life, worked as a translator, kind of blended into the background of Lisbon in the early 20th century.
Okay.
But underneath that ordinary life, there was this incredible mind buzzing with ideas and creativity. And those heteronyms, they became like his way of expressing all the different perspectives he had swirling around inside him.
So like a secret life almost.
In a way, yeah. And, that duality, that's a big theme in his work. Pessoa was constantly looking inward, always questioning reality, even the nature of the self. That exploration of identity, both as an individual and as part of a larger group, it's woven throughout his writing, makes his whole persona even more intriguing.
Okay, so we've got Pessoa, the man, and this idea of heteronyms. Let's actually meet some of these personalities. You mentioned Álvaro de Campos earlier.
Yes. Álvaro de Campos, imagine him like the embodiment of the modern age, a total modernist, really into futurism and free verse.
Gotcha.
And he's fascinated by technology, the idea of speed, and he has this like intense urge to break free from all the rules and expectations of society.
So like a rebel.
Totally. A rebel with a typewriter, yeah.
All right. I like him already. So what kind of stuff did this modern man write about?
His poems, they're bursting with energy and this almost like a desperate desire for freedom. Like picture someone standing at the edge of a whole new world, excited by the possibilities, but also aware of all the chaos that comes with tearing down the old ways. His work captures that tension so well.
I can see that. It's like he's watching the world change super fast and trying to figure out where he fits in.
Right.
That feeling of being caught between the old and the new.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. That's part of why Pessoa's work is still so relevant today. He captures these human experiences, these anxieties we all feel, in a way that goes beyond time and place.
I feel that. Okay, so Campos is the fiery, forward-thinking guy. Who else we got?
Oh, okay. Complete shifting gears. Now we have Ricardo Reis, total opposite of Campos.
Calm.
He's all about classical thought. Like, imagine him as a Stoic philosopher.
Okay.
Embracing restraint, contemplation, and this, like, calm acceptance of fate.
Whoa, so if Campos is the engine of change, Reis is the brakes.
Kind of. But more like he's the steady hand on the wheel.
Yes.
Yeah, a very stark contrast.
Definitely. So how does all that philosophy come through in his poetry?
Reis's poetry, it's about finding peace in the midst of all the impermanence of life. He thinks about fate, resignation, and the beauty of existence. All with this, like, quiet grace. His style is elegant, classical, reflects a mind that's seeking order and harmony in the midst of all the craziness of the world.
So it's like he's found a way to detach from all the, like, turbulence of modern life.
Yeah, and find comfort in those eternal truths of philosophy.
I wonder what a conversation between Campos and Reis would be like.
Oh, man, that'd be something. The restless innovator and the steadfast traditionalist. It'd be a battle of ideas.
Yeah.
But I think somehow they'd find some common ground in their shared quest to, like, understand what it means to be human.
All right. We got the fiery modernist, the Stoic philosopher, who's our third musketeer in this Pessoa party.
Last but not least, we have Alberto Caeiro, the nature poet. Now he's a departure from both Campos and Reis. Caeiro's philosophy is rooted in simplicity, direct experience. He's like Forget abstract thought.
Okay.
Think of him like a modern-day Thoreau, finding deep meaning in the everyday and the natural world.
So he's like the grounded one, the one who finds peace in the tangible world.
Exactly. His poems, they're stripped down, direct, almost childlike in their sense of wonder. He's saying, just be, experience the world through your senses.
I feel that. It's like in a world that feels so complicated, he's reminding us to go back to basics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cairo wants us to shed all those preconceived notions and just observe the world with fresh eyes. To find meaning in the ordinary, the simple beauty of nature.
Okay. Campos, the forward-thinking modernist, Reis, the Stoic philosopher, Cairo, the nature lover,
Right.
each with a unique take on life. But they're all connected by one thing: Fernando Pessoa.
And don't forget, Fernando Pessoa, the one who created them all, even though he doesn't have a distinct persona like the others,
Yeah.
his work is a world of its own, exploring that fragmented self, grappling with those existential questions in a way that feels both personal and, speaks to something universal.
So 4 distinct voices, each with their own perspective, all coming from one guy. This is where it gets really interesting. How did these different voices, these totally different philosophies, interact in Pessoa's work? Did they argue? Did they agree?
That's the thing. Pessoa doesn't try to make them all fit together neatly. He lets them exist on their own terms. Sometimes they agree. Sometimes they clash. But they're always pushing each other and the reader to grapple with the complexity of, well, everything.
It's like he's having a debate with himself, right? Going back and forth between all these different ways of seeing the world. It's no wonder his work is considered so groundbreaking.
Absolutely. And remember, we've only just dipped our toes in. We still need to dive into those big themes running through all of Pessoa's writing. Look at some of his most famous poems and uncover how these different perspectives, well, they all add up to his lasting impact.
Oh, yeah. My brain is already doing somersaults just thinking about all this.
Right.
I think this is going to be one of our most thought-provoking deep dives yet.
I agree. And as we journey further into Pessoa's world, the most important thing is to keep those questions coming. Don't take anything for granted. Embrace the uncertainty and allow yourself to get lost in the maze of his mind.
Okay, let's get lost then. It's wild how Pessoa created this whole world of voices, each with his own unique view on life. It's like he was conducting an orchestra of ideas, letting them clash and harmonize in this grand symphony of human experience.
I love that analogy. And just like a symphony, Pessoa's work is full of recurring themes that echo and intertwine across his different personas.
So let's talk about those themes. What are some of the big ideas that Pessoa was wrestling with, and how did those ideas come through in the voices of his heteronyms?
Well, one of the most prominent themes is existentialism. That feeling of questioning the meaning of existence, grappling with the absurdity of it all, and confronting the freedom and responsibility that comes with making your own choices.
Sounds like Pessoa was really digging deep, huh? Not just accepting things at face value, but really trying to figure things out for himself.
Exactly. And each heteronym approaches these questions from a different angle. For example, take Álvaro de Campos. His poems are filled with this anxious yearning for something more, this desire to break free from the constraints of society and embrace a new, uncharted future.
It's like he's searching for meaning in a world that's changing so rapidly, where old certainties are crumbling and new possibilities are emerging. It must have been both exhilarating and terrifying.
Precisely. And that tension between hope and despair, between the allure of the unknown and the fear of losing what we hold dear, that's a core element of Campos's work.
It's fascinating how one theme like existentialism can be explored in so many different ways, depending on the persona. What about the other heteronyms? How did they approach this idea?
Ricardo Reis, with his Stoic philosophy, offers a contrasting perspective. He accepts the impermanence of life and finds a certain peace in resignation. He doesn't seek to change the world or rebel against fate, but rather embraces the present moment with a calm awareness of its fleeting beauty.
So while Campos is wrestling with the uncertainties of the future, Reis is finding solace in acceptance of what is. It's a really interesting contrast.
It is. And then we have Alberto Caeiro, who rejects abstract thought altogether and finds meaning in the simplicity of direct experience. He doesn't ponder the meaning of life. He simply lives it, immersing himself in the natural world and finding joy in the everyday.
It's almost like Cairo saying, stop overthinking it. Just be present and experience the world as it is. Very Zen.
It is. It's a reminder that meaning isn't always found in grand narratives or complex philosophies. Sometimes it's right there in front of us in the rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sun, the simple act of breathing.
Okay, so existentialism's a big one. What other themes weave their way through Pessoa's work?
Another one is the exploration of identity. Pessoa was fascinated by the idea that we're not fixed entities, but rather a collection of multiple selves constantly evolving and shifting depending on the context.
Makes sense considering his whole heteronym thing. It's like he was externalizing this internal struggle with identity, giving each facet of himself a voice and letting them interact on the page.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just the heteronyms. Even within his own persona as Fernando Pessoa, he grapples with feelings of fragmentation, doubt, and the search for a unified self.
So he's saying that even without creating separate personas, we all contain multitudes within ourselves. We play different roles where different masks present different versions of ourselves to the world, which is incredibly relevant today, don't you think?
Oh,
With social media and the pressure to curate our online identities.
absolutely. Pessoa was wrestling with these ideas long before the internet, but his work resonates even more strongly in our current age of fragmented identities and digital personas.
Makes you wonder if we're all just becoming a collection of curated selves with no real core identity. Or maybe the truth is that our true selves lie somewhere in the spaces between those personas and the constant flux and evolution of who we are.
No, that's a deep question. And Pessoa doesn't try to answer it definitively. He simply invites us to explore the complexities of identity, to embrace the multiplicity within ourselves, and to acknowledge that the search for a unified self might be a lifelong journey.
I'm sensing a pattern here. It seems like Pessoa wasn't interested in providing easy answers, but rather in prompting deeper questions and challenging us to think critically about ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly. His work is an invitation to engage in dialogue, to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace the ambiguity inherent in the human experience.
All right, so we've got existentialism and the exploration of identity. What other themes are we seeing?
Another significant theme is the feeling of isolation and the search for connection. Many of Pessoa's poems across different heteronyms express a sense of alienation, a longing for something more, a yearning to bridge the gap between the self and the other.
That's interesting. You mentioned this theme appearing across different heteronyms. Does that mean that even with their distinct personalities, they shared this underlying sense of loneliness?
It seems so. Perhaps it was a reflection of Pessoa's own experiences, or maybe it speaks to a deeper universal human condition, this inherent feeling of separateness that we all grapple with in different ways.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Sometimes I feel disconnected from the world, like I'm observing it from a distance. It's a strange feeling, both comforting and unsettling.
I love how you put that, and Pessoa captures that feeling so beautifully in his work. He doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of human experience, the anxieties, the uncertainties, the moments of despair. But he also finds moments of beauty, connection, and even joy in the midst of it all.
It's like he's showing us the full spectrum of human emotion, the light and the shadow, and inviting us to find meaning in both.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so compelling. It's not just about exploring these grand themes, it's about how those themes manifest in the everyday, in the mundane details of life, in the inner workings of the human heart.
Okay, so we've got existentialism, the exploration of identity, and the feeling of isolation, and the search for connection. Anything else we should touch on?
One more theme that runs through Pessoa's work is nostalgia, a longing for something lost, a yearning for a past that may or may not have existed.
Nostalgia for what, exactly? A specific time period,
Hmm.
a lost love, or something more abstract, like a sense of belonging or wholeness.
It seems to be a combination of all those things. Sometimes it's for a specific place or time, like in some of Campos's poems where he reminisces about his childhood. Other times it's a more generalized longing for connection, a yearning for something that feels missing in the present moment.
I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, that feeling of longing for something. We can't quite define a sense that something is missing, even if we don't know what it is.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how this theme of nostalgia often intertwines with the exploration of identity.
Yeah.
As we change and evolve, we inevitably lose parts of ourselves along the way.
It's like we're constantly looking back over our shoulders, trying to recapture something we've left behind, while simultaneously moving forward into an uncertain future.
Beautiful imagery. It speaks to that inherent tension in being human, this constant push and pull between the past, present, and future.
Okay, so we've covered existentialism, identity, isolation, nostalgia. It's a lot to process. But I'm starting to grasp the depth and complexity of Pessoa's work. It's not just pretty words or clever ideas. It's about grappling with the fundamental questions of what it means to be alive.
And he does it in such a masterful way, using language to create vivid images, evocative metaphors, profound insights into the human psyche.
All right, I'm ready to dive into the actual poetry. What are some of Pessoa's most famous works, and how do they showcase these different voices and themes we've been talking about?
Well, if we're talking famous poems, we have to start with The Tobacco Shop by Álvaro de Campos. It's a powerful meditation on the feeling of being nothing, yet having all the dreams of the world.
Ooh, that's a powerful image. What does it mean to feel like nothing yet have all the dreams of the world?
It perfectly captures Campos's modernist disillusionment. He's standing in this bustling city surrounded by people and activity, yet feeling completely disconnected, like a ghost drifting through life. And yet within that emptiness, there's this flicker of hope, a sense of infinite possibility represented by all the dreams of the world.
It's like he's saying that even in our most profound moments of isolation, there's still a spark of potential, a glimmer of something more. It's a very existential feeling, that sense of being both insignificant and infinitely vast at the same time.
Exactly. And that duality is a hallmark of Campus's work. He's always grappling with these opposing forces, the desire for meaning and the awareness of the absurd, the longing for connection, and the feeling of profound isolation.
I can see why this poem is considered one of his most important works.
Exactly.
It captures something essential about the human experience, that feeling of being lost and found empty and full all at once.
And it's worth noting that the setting of the poem, A Tobacco Shop, is significant. It's this place of transition, a threshold between the outside world and the inner world, a place where people come and go, leaving behind traces of their lives.
So the tobacco shop becomes a metaphor for the human experience itself, a place of fleeting connections, ephemeral moments, and the constant search for meaning amidst the chaos of everyday life.
That's a brilliant insight. It shows how Pessoa can imbue even the most mundane settings with a deep symbolic meaning.
Okay, the tobacco shop is definitely a powerful one. What other poems really showcase the depth and breadth of Pessoa's work?
Another essential poem is Autopsychography by Fernando Pessoa himself, the orthonym. This one delves into the nature of writing and the role of the poet, suggesting that poets are essentially fakers who construct elaborate facades to hide their true emotions.
Wait, so he's saying that poets are lying? That's a pretty bold statement.
Not necessarily lying, but rather crafting a persona-shaping language to create a specific effect. He's exploring the idea that even in our most vulnerable moments of self-expression, there's an element of artifice, a conscious construction of the self that we present to the world.
That's really interesting. Makes you think about how we all curate our own narratives, even when we think we're being completely authentic. There's always this element of performance shaping ourselves for a particular audience.
You got it.
Hmm.
And Pessoa, with his heteronyms, takes this to the extreme. He's not just crafting one persona, he's creating a whole cast of voices, each with its own unique style and perspective.
It's like he's saying that the self isn't a singular thing, but rather a multitude of possibilities, a chorus of voices vying for attention. And the poet's job is to give those voices space to breathe, to explore their complexities, and to reveal the multifaceted nature of human experience.
That's beautiful. And it speaks to the impact of Pessoa's work. He's not just writing poetry, he's creating a new way of understanding the self, the world, and the relationship between the two.
Okay, we've got the tobacco shop and autopsychography. What other poems should we add to our Pessoa playlist?
Let's go with I Know Not What Tomorrow Will Bring by Ricardo Reis. This poem really embodies Reis's Stoic philosophy, emphasizing the fleeting nature of time and the importance of accepting life's impermanence.
Oh, Reis the Stoic. I bet there's some beautiful lines in there about accepting fate and living in the present moment.
There are. One that stands out is, I know not what tomorrow will bring, but I know I must face it. It's simple but powerful and really sums up Reis's approach to life. He doesn't dwell on the past or worry about the future. He just focuses on the now and accepts whatever it may bring.
It's a calming perspective, especially in a world that often feels so chaotic. It reminds us that we can't control everything, but we can control how we respond to what life throws our way.
You got it. And that's the beauty of Stoicism. It's not about being passive. It's about finding peace and resilience in the face of adversity by focusing on what we can control: our thoughts, our actions, our attitudes.
All right, so we've got the angsty modernist, the Stoic philosopher. What about the nature lover? Did Cairo write anything as catchy as Campos's Nothing in All the Dreams line?
Cairo's poems are less about catchy lines and more about simple, profound truths. In The Keeper of Sheep, he sums up his philosophy beautifully. To think is to be sick. To feel is to be well.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It's like he's saying that overthinking things just takes us further away from truth, from simply experiencing life.
Exactly. Cairo believed that real understanding comes from direct experience, from immersing ourselves in the world without overanalyzing it. He saw thinking as a kind of illness, a way of distancing ourselves from the immediacy of life.
That's radical, but also kind of liberating. It's
Yeah.
like he's giving us permission to let go of our need to analyze everything and just be present.
And it's a powerful message in a world that's constantly bombarding us with information and demanding our attention. Cairo reminds us that sometimes the most profound truths are found in the simplest things: the warmth of the sun, the scent of the earth, the feeling of the wind on our skin.
We've covered Campos Race and Cairo. You mentioned another poem earlier, Ode to the Sea by Campos. What's special about that one?
Ode to the Sea is a great example of how Campos uses metaphor to explore what it means to be human. He uses the sea as a symbol of vastness, uncertainty, and the boundless potential of the human spirit. He writes, "The sea is everything that we are not," highlighting the contrast between the immensity of nature and the limits of human experience.
It's like he's looking at the sea and seeing a reflection of his own inner world, the vastness of his thoughts and emotions compared to the confines of his physical being.
Exactly. The sea becomes a mirror reflecting back his anxieties, his aspirations, and that tension between wanting freedom and knowing he's only human.
It's amazing how Pessoa can take something like the sea and make it into this profound metaphor for the human experience.
That's what makes him such a great poet, isn't it? Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Using language to reveal the hidden depths of the world and ourselves.
Okay, I think we've done a pretty good job of unpacking Pessoa and his heteronyms. We've looked at the man himself, the concept of heteronyms, the big themes in his work, and some of his most famous poems. Is there anything else we should touch on? Any other fun facts about Pessoa our listeners should know?
One thing I find really interesting is how Pessoa's seemingly normal life as a translator actually fed into his writing. Being exposed to all those different languages and cultures probably helped him understand the idea of multiple perspectives and the fluidity of identity.
So his day job was translating languages, but his real passion was translating the complexities of the human soul. That's pretty cool.
It is. It shows how Pessoa was always moving between different worlds, the practical and the philosophical, the mundane and the profound. He found beauty and meaning in the everyday, even as he grappled with the biggest existential questions.
Just like his heteronyms living a double life. And in a way, aren't we all doing that to some extent? We all have different sides to ourselves, different roles, we play different masks we wear.
Absolutely. And Pessoa, with his heteronyms, takes that idea to the extreme. He shows us that it's okay to embrace the many sides of ourselves, to acknowledge the different voices and perspectives that make us who we are.
I love that. It's like he's giving us permission to be complex, to not have all the answers, and to find beauty in the searching.
And to always be curious, to never stop questioning and exploring the world around us and the world within us.
Beautifully said. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored Fernando Pessoa's life and work, delved into the world of his heteronyms, and unpacked some of the big themes running through his writing. But I feel like there's still so much more to discover, so many layers to peel back.
There is. Pessoa's work is like a bottomless well of inspiration, a labyrinth of ideas that you can spend a lifetime exploring and still find new things.
It's daunting but also exciting to know that we've only just scratched the surface of this incredible writer.
It is. But that's the beauty of it. With Pessoa, the journey is just as important as the destination. It's about the process of questioning, exploring, and grappling with the complexities of his work, and ultimately with the complexities of our own lives.
Well said. All right, folks, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Fernando Pessoa. I hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have, and I hope it's inspired you to explore his work further and to embrace the complexities of your own unique identity. It's funny, as we've been talking about Pessoa and these heteronyms of his, I can't help but think about how much his work still matters today, even though he was writing like almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sign of a true visionary, right?
Totally.
Their ideas, they go beyond their own time. They keep speaking to people for generations.
Exactly. Like this whole thing with the multiple selves, different personalities inside one person. It's not just some like literary trick,
Right.
It's something we all experience in a way.
Oh, absolutely. Like, we all put on different masks depending on who we're with, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm different with my family than I am with friends, different at work. It's just how we navigate the world.
And then you throw social media into the mix.
Oh, man.
It's like we're curating these different versions of ourselves for everyone to see.
It's wild, isn't it? Like, it really makes you question what identity even means in this digital age. Like, are those online selves really us, or are they just like these polished facades?
Right. It's kind of scary to think maybe we're all just becoming these collections of personas, like with no real me underneath. But also, I don't know, there's something kind of freeing about that too.
It's a total head scratcher. I think the key, maybe, is to recognize those different parts of ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
Embrace them without losing sight of, like, the core of who you are. Don't get lost in the performance.
Ooh, I like that. Embrace the multiplicity, but don't lose your core self.
Hmm.
Okay, so maybe Pessoa was onto something with these heteronyms. It wasn't just him being eccentric,
I
right?
don't think so.
It was a way of wrestling with what it means to be human when the world's always telling you to be this or that, depending on who you're with.
I think you hit the nail on the head. He was ahead of the curve, really. Exploring themes that feel even more relevant now in our world, where everyone's got so many different sides to them.
And I think that's why people are still so drawn to his work, you know?
Yeah.
He makes us confront those big questions, the ones we might normally try to avoid. Like, who am I? What's the point of it all? How do I find connection when everything feels so isolating?
And he does it in such a beautiful way. It makes you think. Whether it's Campo's yearning for freedom, Reis's stoic acceptance, or Cairo's simplicity, there's a piece of Pessoa's work that speaks to everyone, I think.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive into Pessoa's world has been incredible. It's given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. And honestly, I feel like we've only just, dipped our toes in.
Oh, definitely. There's so much more to discover in his writing, little details and connections that pop out every time you read it. I really hope our listeners will check out his work, get lost in those worlds he created with his heteronyms.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to everyone listening, if you're up for a literary adventure, something that'll make you think, that'll stretch your understanding of what it means to be human, and maybe even leave you with more questions than answers, well, Fernando Pessoa is your guy.
You might even discover something new about yourself in the process.
Beautifully put. That about wraps it up for our deep dive into the world of Fernando Pessoa. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing all the messy, wonderful complexity of life.